Hi, I'm Aaron. Welcome to the channel. If you're one of the 9 people who watched my first video, you may recall that I mentioned that I was working on a follow-up video about a potential triennial human hunt that Oda may have teased. This was in reference to the Oykot Kingdom, where Nami and Nojiko were found by Bellemere, all the way back in East Blue. Now, I don't pretend this was an original theory. I'm not the first to suggest the possibility, and I'm sure I won't be the last before Oda confirms or eliminates the possibility. But I thought my contributions to the discussion might be worthwhile. And then my kid got sick. Now, if you're a single parent watching this video, you're going to understand me when I say your kids come first, and sick kids get priority over video uploads watched by fewer than 10 people. Anyway, my son got better, as they do. And once again, I sat down to record my video on the Oykot Kingdom and Nami's possible hidden origins. Yes, this was going to be a Nami video. As I sat down to record, and I kid you not, I saw on the same day Teching 101's latest video, and it was basically the video I intended to make. But you know what? That's totally okay. I watched his video, and it was great. Honestly, he brought up something I had never considered in my own research into the topic, which I'll specify what it is when I bring it up later. I knew, however, that I couldn't just make the same video the great Teching made. If I wanted to approach the topic, I would need to bring even more to the table. So with that, I started digging even further. At some points, I had at least a dozen tabs open as I scoured the One Piece wiki and reviewed individual chapters and checked the Vivre cards, looking for my even more. And then I stumbled upon something which intrigued me, and I knew I had my video. So this video is being recorded and uploaded before Teching has the chance to beat me to the punch again, because I know he can. Sick kids beat... Well, no, that's a bridge too far. Anyway, this is my attempt at predicting the end of One Piece. I have no intention of asking people to like and subscribe to my content as a regular practice, but this one might be an exception, so please do like and subscribe if you think this theory has potential so that others have the chance to watch too. By the way, the script ended up being 15 pages, so I'm sorry in advance. So, opening tangent out of the way, let me set the scene for you. 20 years ago, the Oykot Kingdom was in the midst of being ravaged by pirates. Marine troops were sent to quell the pirate attack, and a young Bellemere found herself on the verge of death in the aftermath of the battle. About to surrender to death, Bellemere mustered the strength to keep going when she saw a young Nojiko carrying Nami, the 2 girls otherwise alone on a field of death and destruction. Bellemere is able to take possession of a small boat and sail back to Kokoyashi village with Nojiko and Nami in tow. We all know the story. It's early One Piece. It's the classic One Piece, East Blue. Gives us great feelings to go back and watch and learn about that. We aren't led to believe that Bellemere makes any additional stops along the way, and if she did, it would make sense for her to seek treatment for the girls and herself wherever else she stopped, so it's unlikely that she stopped between Oykot and Kokoyashi. And this next bit is important. Bellemere deserted the Marines. There is no indication she officially resigned her commission or returned to civilian life through established procedure, and this is something which is not okay for modern militaries. Her adoption of Nojiko and Nami is not official in any legal capacity, including the census records of her own village. Arlong had seized these records when invading Kokoyashi in the first place, and Bellemere was not listed as the legal parent of Nojiko or Nami. This is, of course, a major reason why, spoiler alert, Bellemere's decision to sacrifice herself in order not to deny her girls is so impactful. But that's a whole other conversation. Why is this important? Well, as many others have speculated, Bellemere may have found herself in combat during one of the triennial human hunts. The timeline fits too. If the human hunt, which came to be known as the God Valley Incident, was 38 years before the present day, and the battle at Oykot, whatever it was 20 years before the present day, there is an 18-year gap between the events, which is perfectly divisible by the 3-year periods between human hunts. Again, they're triennial. But wait, I hear you say. Oykot was just a pirate attack, repelled by Marines. Do you know what else was a simple pirate attack repelled by Marines? God Valley. And the similarities don't end there. Let me provide a brief rundown. As I mentioned, pirates attack both islands, with Marines intervening shortly thereafter. Also just mentioned, they both fit on the timeline for when they occur. God Valley, obviously, because we have been told that's what it is, and Oykot by extension because of the year in which it falls. Bellemere deserts the Marines, which, while not confirmed yet, all signs point to Dragon deserting the Marines as a result of what he witnesses at God Valley. Bellemere escapes the island with 2 native children. Well, technically their status as natives is not confirmed. Dragon has recently been asked to escape the island with 2 native children. Again, technically, Shamrock and Shanks are kind of half natives in a manner of speaking, but you get the similarities. The parallels are there. And if Oykot is not a human hunt, the parallels are still there. It's important to note that Dragon was clearly not informed of the true nature of his orders. From the perspective of a low-ranking Marine, God Valley was not a human hunt for celestial dragons because that concept doesn't exist to the world and the public at large. While Garp seemed to know what was going on, having referred to God Valley as a celestial dragon's field trip he didn't care to attend in a previous chapter, we can't really assume all rank-and-file Marines knew what they were sailing into when they arrived at God Valley. It's highly likely that they were only told they were there to repel the Rox and Roger pirate crew's attack on the island. Like Dragon, Bellemere is a low-ranking Marine during the battle for Oykot. If Oykot was the setting for a human hunt, Bellemere isn't going to be given that information. At this point, I want to bring specific supplemental material to your attention. In discussing the One Piece film Strong World, Oda is on the record saying he had conceived of a backstory for Nami's biological parents, but shelved the idea due to it being too emotional. However, as of Film Gold, Oda still has the idea in mind. He's not fully abandoned it. So whatever that too emotional story was, it's going to connect to Nami, it's going to connect to Oykot, and it's going to connect to her parents. We just don't know it yet. This may be nothing at all. It may be an idea that Oda did ultimately abandon at some point after Film Gold's release. I don't claim there's a smoking gun for the theory that Oykot was ground zero of a human hunt. However, we do know that Oykot is a turning point in Nami's backstory. I mean, how could it not be? She wouldn't have ended up with Bellemere had the battle for Oykot not happened. It's the last possible time Nami was with her biological parents. As evidenced by Kuma's flashback and the scenes depicted in Chapter 1160, the concept of powerful rulers descending from a world above to hunt your family as if they were rabbits is incredibly emotional and dark material. And if this were Oda's idea for Nami's backstory, it's easy to see why it may have been cut from Strong World. I'd also point out the antagonist of Strong World is Shiki the Golden Lion. And where was he at? In fact, where is he at now in the manga? He's at God Valley. He would serve as a fascinating character to inform Nami of the nature of her biological parents' deaths and what happened to her homeland. All of the parallels between God Valley and Oykot, its place on the timeline, and the small bits of information from Oda about Nami's backstory lead me to believe that Oykot was, more likely than not, the site of a human hunt. By this point, I hope I've laid out a somewhat solid case for why Oykot deserves additional scrutiny, at the very least. You don't have to believe what I'm saying, but the event deserves scrutiny. As I said, though, at the beginning of the video, I think I found even more as a result of researching Oykot further, and I believe it's one of the many breadcrumbs which indicate what the final saga of One Piece will look like and how this modern masterpiece will conclude. So, you see, Oykot was the first piece of a greater puzzle for me. The second piece was the identity of the pirates Bellemere fought at Oykot. And this is where I think I offer something you won't hear anywhere else. Because I propose that the pirates who attacked Oykot were none other than Red-Haired Shanks and the Red-Haired Pirates. Now, if you've heard that one before, write a comment. Let me know. I'd love to hear if you've heard it and what you think. Anyway, as I was saying, I promise this goes even further. There's reasons to believe this, so let's get into it. Why would the Red-Haired Pirates be at Oykot? First, let's answer the obvious question. Is it even possible for Shanks to have been at Oykot based on the established timeline? Well, the answer is surprisingly yes. And let's go for the rundown here. Just to establish the fact, the Oykot Kingdom is or was in the East Blue. 24 years ago, which would be 4 years before whatever transpired at Oykot, Shanks was in Logtown, for Captain Roger's execution. This puts him squarely in East Blue. 22 years ago, two years later, and 2 years before Oykot, Shanks recruited Yasopp from Syrup Village. Again, Shanks is squarely in East Blue. 20 years ago, the battle for Oykot is fought. 2 years after Shanks's last confirmed time-stamped location. See, there's no location between his recruiting Yasopp and the battle for Oykot that put Shanks anywhere outside of East Blue. 19 years ago, Shanks adopts Uta on an unnamed island after defeating a rival pirate crew. Now, we don't know where this island is. This might not be in East Blue, and it fits on the timeline if it's considered canon, but we can't really use it to pinpoint Shanks's location. Regarding the canon status of Uta, where I fall with this is that Uta does make an appearance, however minor, in the manga. And so, at least child Uta is canonical until Oda says otherwise. Obviously, the events of the movie and what happens with her plan to bring the whole world into a dream, sorry, that was a spoiler, can't work within the canon, and so that aspect cannot be canonical. Over the next 5 years, however, we know Shanks was scarred by Blackbeard and dueled Mihawk, but specific times and places are really not provided. It's likely at least some of this took place in the Grand Line, though as 5 years after adopting Uta and 6 years after Oykot, Shanks is known to have traveled to Marie Joyce as well as visited Skopper Gaban and Elbaf. However, just 1 year after those events, 7 years after Oykot, Shanks manages to steal the Gomu Gomu no Mi and returns to East Blue within the same year, where he sets up a base of operations at Fuchsia Village on Dawn Island. Now, if that was too long and you didn't listen or tune me out, I'm going to shorten it up for you here. As a rookie pirate, Shanks was operating and recruiting in East Blue at the appropriate time, and nothing conflicts with his possible participation at Oykot. It's that simple. The real question is why Shanks might be involved with a human hunt at Oykot. And in researching for this video, it becomes very clear that Shanks is a man on a mission. And that mission is to help bring about what his former crew arrived too early to see. What I refer to, and what I believe the manga refers to, as the dawn of the world. As we know, the Roger Pirates arrived at Laugh Tale too early. And the Roger Pirates respond to their premature arrival in different ways. Roger conceives a child with Port-Gusty Rouge, a child that Roger claims will be able to finish what he cannot. Shanks operates primarily within East Blue, the sea in which his mentor was born and died. Crocus settles at Reverse Mountain at a lighthouse at the beginning of the Grand Line. Rayleigh settles down in Sabaody with Shaki, a mangrove near the exact middle of the Grand Line. Odin returns to Wano to open the borders, which coincidentally we know is required to access Pluton. Gaban settles down in Elbaf, an island near the end of the Grand Line. I'm not the first to point this out, but it seems almost by design that members of the Roger Pirates position themselves at strategic points in East Blue and along the Grand Line. I'm also not the first to suggest that Shanks intended Ace to receive the Gomu Gomu no Mi, but I want you to consider it in a broader context. Number one, Roger told his crew his yet unconceived son would accomplish what the Roger Pirates could not or were too early to accomplish. This is Roger and his crew were aware they were too early for something yet to come. This is reinforced by Odin's warning to Kaido of powerful pirates or powerful people soon to arrive in the New World to challenge him. This is reinforced by Roger's desire to have a child to accomplish what he failed to do. This is reinforced when Rayleigh tells Robin he and the Roger Pirates were unable to do anything even with the true history when they discovered it, and his suggestion to her that she discover it for herself to see if she could do anything differently. It's reinforced by Whitebeard's claim that someone will soon emerge carrying centuries of history on his back to challenge the whole world to a fight, and that when the One Piece is found, the entire world will be turned upside down. And I want you to put a pin in that phrase, the world will be turned upside down, because we're going to come back to it. I want you to remember that Whitebeard was falsely accused of grooming Ace to become the Pirate King, an accusation which ultimately led to his stabbing at the hands of Squard. Let me suggest that the actions of Whitebeard, that he was accused of at least, in fact are the very things that the remaining Roger Pirates were attempting to do. Out of reverence for Roger, Shanks sought out Ace in East Blue, ultimately establishing his base of operation on the very island Ace lived. Shanks intended to provide Ace with the Gomu Gomu no Mi, a fruit which somehow is key to whatever is soon to happen, then guide or mentor Ace in one form or another on his journey to Laugh-Tale. Along the way, Ace would encounter Crocus, Rayleigh, and Gabon at strategic points on the Grand Line, and possibly even Odin had Odin not been killed by Kaido, who would provide further guidance and training as he went. Again, Odin would be awaiting Ace in Wano with Pluton, so as Ace nears the end of the Grand Line, he would be equipped with a battleship capable of busting islands. Together, the surviving members of the Roger Pirates would fulfill their captain's wish to make his son the next king of the pirates. This was the plan, and the plan failed. Now, don't worry, I'll get to this. It's going to be a little while, though. Again, 15-page script. Stick with me. Why this plan? If Shanks could obtain the Gomu Gomu no Mi, why not eat it himself and make good on his promise to sail to Laugh-Tale with Buggy? This is where Roger's final words to Shanks begin to matter. You see, we don't know what was said. All we know is that Roger made Shanks cry. I mean, that's probably not what Roger was trying to do. Let me be very clear. I don't know the specifics of what was said, but I think we can kind of intuit what the effect those words had on Shanks were. Now, I mentioned Whitebeard's The One Piece's real speech a minute or two ago, but part of the speech I skipped over is the beginning. Whitebeard's speech begins with the statement that Blackbeard is not the man Roger is waiting for, which leaves me with the idea that there is a way for characters in-universe to identify who Roger is waiting for. I mean, obviously, as readers, we know it's most likely Luffy, barring some major twist. I believe Roger's last words to Shanks confirmed Roger was waiting for someone who couldn't be Shanks. I'm not claiming this was the intent of Roger's words, but Shanks, who Gabon refers to as a child of destiny in chapter 1152, realizes for whatever reason that he cannot be the one to fulfill his own mentor's wish. Like Blackbeard, Shanks is not the man Roger is waiting for. Whatever it means to be a child of destiny, I believe learning he isn't the one would be profoundly upsetting to Shanks, and it might explain the tears we see at their parting. So what does Shanks do? He attempts to make Roger's claim that his son would be the one to bring about his dream into reality. And as I mentioned before, he sets out to locate his captain's son and secure the Gomu Gomu no Mi for his future use. I know I've taken my time working my way to answer the original question, but this is where your patience is rewarded. Why would the red-haired pirates be at Oykot? It's honestly pretty simple. What were some of the main prizes during the human hunt at God Valley? Extremely powerful devil fruits. What did Shanks intend to give Ace? An extremely powerful devil fruit. The sea is vast and quality leads for specific fruits are slim, so where would you go if you want to acquire a powerful fruit sought after by the highest echelons of the world government? You would go to the recreational game through which members of the highest echelons of the world government could win powerful devil fruits. The stage is almost set. Red-Haired Shanks, Scourge of the East Blue, sets sail for Oykot to raid the triennial human hunt, hoping to find the Gomu Gomu no Mi. At this point, I want to introduce another character I suspect was a major player in the events at Oykot, Dracule Mihawk. Now, we actually know very little about Mihawk's past. I mean, surprisingly little. I was shocked when I went and looked into this. And what we do know, I can list on 5 or 6 fingers, okay? There's really not any dates or timestamps for it. It's just some broad strokes, but here we go. 1. He rose to fame before the start of the Great Age of Pirates. 2. He experienced a great betrayal of some sort, which leads him to distrust people. We see that he's a loner. He lives alone in a castle. I mean, I guess Perona takes up residence there, and he sails a one-man coffin ship. 3. He holds a grudge against the Marines and gained the epithet Marine Hunter. 4. 24 years ago, and this is the only time-stamped event, at the age of 19, he attended Roger's execution. 5. He became a warlord at an unknown point in the past. 6. he had several high-profile duels with Red-Haired Shanks. That's all we know. At least that's all I could find from the manga and the wiki and the Viva cards, but I'm just one guy. The question I want to ask is, when did Mihawk first encounter Shanks? The world of One Piece is devoid of social media, thank goodness. Social media kind of sucks half the time. So I have a hard time imagining that Mihawk just called Shanks via transponder snail Facebook one afternoon and told him to break out the adult beverages because he's dropping by. If you'll remember, Shanks also decided not to pursue the One Piece immediately, much to Buggy's chagrin, so it's far less likely that they would have run into each other on the Grand Line. Again, Shanks spent years in East Blue, at least that's what it seems to be. Fortunately, Oda's already given us a likely answer. Mihawk and Shanks most likely met in Logetown on the day of Roger's execution. They were both there in the same place at the same time. Now, I freely admit what I'm about to suggest is speculation, but in looking for a way to fit what little we know about Mihawk into this theory, I want to suggest that Shanks' first inclination was not to fight Mihawk. Rather, I want to suggest that Shanks wanted to recruit Mihawk, because at this point, Shanks had asked Buggy to join his crew, and Buggy said no, because Shanks wouldn't go after the One Piece. And within 2 years, he would recruit Yasopp, so this is the recruiting phase. My theory is as follows. Shanks encounters Mihawk at Logetown, and wants to recruit him. Whether or not Shanks is initially successful, I do not know, but I like to think that Shanks challenged Mihawk to what would become their legendary duels as an attempt to recruit him, in a similar fashion, honestly, to how Rox and Harold fought multiple times during Rox's attempts to woo Harold. Now, at some point before the Battle of Oykot, or perhaps because of the Battle of Oykot, Mihawk, the Marine Hunter, agrees to join Shanks under the impression that they would be going to Oykot to either defeat the Celestial Dragons and Marines on or around the island. And this is a noble goal. It seems that Mihawk already wants to defeat the Marines, and so he'd want to follow a captain who would enable him to do this. But while this is a noble goal, Shanks has resigned himself to the notion that he will not be the one to achieve Roger's dream. He is not going to be the one to change the world. And he travels to Oykot with the intention of tracking down the Gomu Gomu no Mi, which is well short of saving the island or defeating the Marines or taking over, defeating the Celestial Dragons. Just as Buggy's disappointment with Shanks resulted in Buggy rejecting Shanks' offer to join his crew, I believe Mihawk would be disappointed in the Shanks that he sees at Oykot. Disappointed that Shanks is unwilling to do more to fight the Celestial Dragons or to save the civilians. It's even possible that Mihawk learns Shanks' father is one of the very god knights Mihawks might want to fight. Shanks' unwillingness to do more, and we'll talk about why this is again, makes him unworthy to be Mihawk's captain, and Mihawk leaves the red-haired pirates in much the same way Zoro has said he would if Luffy proved unworthy of being his captain. Subsequently, I believe that Mihawk would continue to duel Shanks in attempts to coax out the man Mihawk believes Shanks can become, and to prove himself superior to his once captain who seemingly gave up. Mihawk may even have become a warlord as a way of getting a rise out of Shanks. Because why would the Marine Hunter ally with the Marines otherwise? The duels between these great men would continue until Shanks loses his arm to the Lord of the Coast, at which point Mihawk realizes that Shanks will never be the man he wanted him to be. This would remain the status quo until years later, when Mihawk has a chance encounter with a young swordsman and his captain, who happens to wear a very familiar straw hat. When Mihawk sets out to deliver Luffy's wanted poster to Shanks, it's because Mihawk has caught a glimpse of what Shanks was trying to accomplish all along. Shanks, initially, if you'll remember, greets Mihawk very seriously, but warms to him considerably when he realizes what has actually brought Mihawk to the island. Now, this story is speculation. But it's speculation that checks the boxes of what little we know about Mihawk's past. It explains the sense of betrayal he felt and the distrust he has for other people. It explains a rationale for their regular duels. It reinforces the perception of Shanks as a bit of a disappointment to his peers. Again, we know Buggy was disappointed with Shanks. Shanks was a child of destiny who even Buggy would willingly follow, and for reasons unknown, he refused the call, choosing instead to maintain the status quo, and float around East Blue. Whitebeard was described as one to guard the throne without sitting on it, and Shanks fits the same mold. Now, returning to Oykot, Shanks' attempt to locate the Gomu Gomu no Mi ends in failure. The fruit isn't there, Mihawk quits the red-haired pirates, and it will be 7 years before Shanks is able to acquire the fruit. Meanwhile, a Navy soldier rescues 2 small girls and smuggles them away to her hometown, Kokoyashi Village. And while all this is interesting, it's also just kind of disappointing. It feels like there kind of needs to be a little bit something more. Again, this is a speculation video, so we're going to go with it. And this brings me back to the topic of Nami's parentage. There, we got that angled right. Oda's remarks about the tragic backstory cut from Strong World inspired me to dig into characters who may be related to Nami. I honestly considered whether Nami might be the daughter of Rayleigh and Shaki at one point. And before you write them off as being too old, remember Roger was in his 50s when he conceived Ace? But to be honest, I couldn't really find anything linking them to East Blue. All I had was a vague notion that Shaki's treatment as the jewel or treasure of Hachinosu kind of contrasts nicely with Nami's obsession over treasure. But again, there's not really anything there. It's not impossible. There's just no reason to discuss it as more than a passing mention. I next considered whether Nami might be the daughter of Gloriosa. I guess I really want Nami to connect to Amazon Lily for some reason. Born during the time of her banishment from Amazon Lily, and while it's possible the idea runs into the same issues as the idea that it was Rayleigh and Shaki. But as I wrote this script, literally as I was writing it, I had another idea. What if Nami is the daughter of Shanks? Now, I'm not proposing this is definitely true, but it does fit the timeline. During the battle at Oykot, Shanks would have been a very young 19 years old, coincidentally the same age that Luffy is now. We don't know if this occurred closer to his 19th or 20th birthday. Oykot, the way years work and line up, it could have come the day before he turned 20 or the day after he turned 19. But either way, Shanks would have been old enough to conceive a child as an adult, so no children need to engage in the horizontal friction action to make this happen. 19 is admittedly quite young, but if we accept that Roger conceived Ace in his mid-50s and Rouge held Ace in her womb for 20 months, the possibility of a 19-year-old father really shouldn't be too hard to accept. In fact, just 1 year later, Shanks becomes a father anyway. He adopts Uta at 20 years old. So, canonically, Shanks is a young father either way. What would this do for the story, though? I've already likened Shanks' relationship with Mihawk to Rox's relationship with Harold. If Shanks' motivation for fighting at Oykot were to save his wife and daughter, or his lover and daughter, it would further cement those parallels. It would also contrast Shanks with his own father, Garling, who killed his lover to take back his children. I will say that this theory might complicate Shanks' history with Makino. I strongly suspect that baby is his, and it would make Oda feel almost like a replacement baby for the child he supposedly, allegedly, theoretically lost. But these slight misgivings don't disqualify the theory. As a bonus, the theory does fit nicely with the idea that children are a parent's greatest weakness, which is a comment we've heard a few times lately in the manga. I want you now to imagine how a triennial human hunt at Oykot might play out, with Shanks desperately trying to find his child and hoping to stumble upon the Gomu Gomu no Mi at the same event, seemingly ignoring the evils of the celestial dragons as he prioritizes his family and his mission. As the Rocks pirates crumbled at God Valley, the red-haired pirates, you can imagine, suffered a defeat which fractured the crew when Mihawk questioned his captain's leadership and set out on his own. It's even possible that Shanks may have encountered and fought his own father at Oykot. Shanks leaves the island thinking his family is dead, not knowing an otherwise unremarkable marine saved his child. Oykot is to Shanks, as God Valley is to Rocks, and as Sabundi is to Luffy, a complete collapse. Now, that's a little bit more engaging than just going there on the hope that a fruit was there and it not being there. What Shanks does next, and in what order, is a bit of a mystery. See, he won't become an emperor for another 14 years, 6 years before the present day in the story. We know he adopts Uta 1 year after the incident at Oykot, after which there's a 5-year gap in Shanks' known activities. Shanks' next time-verified action is his attempt to visit Harold in Elbaf 14 years before the current day in the series. There are two important things to note about this meeting, though. We know Shanks first encounters Harold at Marie Joyce, meaning that Shanks traveled there during this 5-year gap. This may or may not have been the same trip to Marie Joyce mentioned by Shamrock in Chapter 1138, during which Shanks is alleged to have renounced the Holy Land in favor of the lower world. When Shanks arrived at Elbaf 14 years ago, he was already scarred by Blackbeard. Shanks lacked those scars when he found Uta, and has them when he got to Elbaf, which means that his encounter with Blackbeard happens during the 5-year gap that we're talking about now. I'm going to speculate here that this might have happened on the way to Elbaf, because where is Whitebeard located? In the New World. Elbaf is in the New World. Blackbeard is sticking close to Whitebeard, biding his time. This is when they're brought closest together. So those scars might be very, very fresh at this time. I'm going to speculate on 2 additional points here. Number 1, Fisher Tiger escaped Marie Joyce 16 years ago, and he returned to free the Celestial Dragon's slaves 15 years before the present day, so 1 year after escaping. 1 year before, coincidentally, Shanks arrived in Elbaf. It's entirely possible that Shanks arrived at Marie Joyce and played a role in Fisher Tiger's escape or liberation efforts after renouncing his family ties, though there's no real concrete evidence for this. It just would kind of make some sense that if Shanks met or ran into Harold 1 year before at Marie Joyce and then took 1 year to get to Elbaf, that those dates could line up a little bit. Again, speculation, but it's fun. As Elbaf is in the New World, again, point number 2, I want to reemphasize that this might be where Blackbeard scarred Shanks. No proof for that, but where would the better opportunity be for this to happen? Now, from this point on, Shanks' activity is more well known, and I won't be as thorough in covering it unless there is more to speculate. 1 year after leaving Elbaf, Shanks engages CP9 in combat on the open seas and secures the Gomu Gomu no Mi. This may have occurred immediately after leaving Elbaf and had been Shanks' reason for returning to East Blue, which he does 1 year later. It's unknown how the government first acquired the Gomu Gomu no Mi, but it may have had something to do with the incident in Orist Castle in Elbaf the previous year. In fact, Shanks may have literally left Elbaf pursuing the government agents who absconded with the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Second, while based at Fuchsia Village, the Gomu Gomu no Mi is eaten by Monkey D. Luffy, a local boy who idolizes Shanks and dreams of becoming a pirate. Now, I mentioned earlier that Shanks' plan to locate Roger's son and raise him into the next Pirate King failed. And I believe that happens at this moment, when the Gomu Gomu no Mi is when it reveals itself to a boy who wasn't Ace and allows itself to be eaten. Now, I say it that way because we know that zone-type devil fruits, and that's what the Gomu Gomu no Mi is, have a will of their own according to the 5 elders. The Gomu Gomu no Mi, or rather the Hito Hito no Mi, model Nika, somehow finds its way out of the chest it was stored in and into the mouth of perhaps the perfect candidate for it. Luffy is never shown digging through Shanks' possessions, and to be honest, I kind of doubt Luffy would steal from Shanks, at least intentionally. So it seems likely that somehow the fruit put itself in Luffy's path, that it sensed something in him that forced it or convinced it to reveal itself to him. I'll point out that Shanks' reaction is not initially, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you ate it, you're going to be the savior." Shanks did not want Luffy to eat that fruit, but we also know he didn't intend to eat it himself, as he had approximately a whole year to do so and never did. He just carried it back to East Blue. The plan had to be for Ace to eat the fruit. Shanks had found the boy, and he had found the fruit. He had both together on the same island at the same time, and just as he was about to accomplish the mission he had worked on for more than a decade, well, almost a decade, no, maybe more than a decade, fate intervenes. A lot is made about whether Luffy is a child of prophecy, and I honestly hope to make a video on the subject later. For now, I simply want to say that there's a difference between being destined to receive the fruit and become a hero versus receiving the fruit because of your innately ideal qualities. As we see in Chapter 1, Shanks does not immediately give Luffy the hat or ask Luffy to return it in the future. Shanks leaves the island before returning in time to save Luffy, and only gives Luffy the hat after Luffy vows to find a crew that will surpass Shanks' own crew. And this is what I believe is the true meaning of Shanks' claim to bet his arm on a new era. Shanks has long known he and his contemporaries aren't the man Roger is waiting for. And I think in this moment Shanks accepts it's not the son of his captain either. The fruit with a will of its own chose the boy Shanks had overlooked. But as he heard Luffy sound so much like his captain, in fact, he said that Luffy said the same words that Roger had said, Shanks made peace with this twist of fate. Shanks departs from Fuchsia Village with a new mission. He returns to the Grand Line. Along the way, he stops to speak with Crocus, Rayleigh, Gabon, telling them to await the arrival of a boy named Monkey D. Luffy wearing an unmistakable straw hat. His new mission, maintain the status quo until the Straw Hat Pirates are powerful enough in their own right to match him, effectively maintaining a stalemate which put the One Piece out of reach for several years. We see glimpses of this mission throughout the series. Shanks apprehends Loki, who is determined to destroy the world 6 years before the present day. For this, Shanks is widely proclaimed a new Emperor of the Sea. 2. Shanks attempts to have Whitebeard call off Ace to prevent the era from spiraling into chaos, as he describes it aboard Whitebeard's ship. He's maintaining the status quo. 3. When this fails, Shanks attempts to go to Marineford and stop the war, minimizing the fallout, but is interrupted by Kaido along the way. However, Shanks is able to convince Kaido via words or power or who knows what to turn back, preventing a catastrophic situation from becoming exponentially worse. 5. He does succeed in ending the war after his late arrival at Marineford, and Sengoku curiously remarks that he is only listening to Shanks because of who he is. Now, a lot of speculation has to do with him being the son of a celestial dragon. That might be the case. It might also be because Shanks is known as a peacemaker, as someone who maintains balance in the world, and Sengoku respects or needs that presence. This brings us to the present day. Shanks recognizes Luffy is ready, or nearly ready, to fulfill their promise and tells his first mate, Ben Beckman, it's time to get the One Piece. The question is, why now? Why does Luffy being an emperor signify it's time to pursue it? Well, the simplest answer is that Big Mom and Kaido's defeat creates a break in the stalemate amongst the emperors, which allows the remaining players to make their moves. However, I honestly believe that Shanks has another goal in mind. I believe Shanks fully intends to defeat Blackbeard, the one character that Shanks is consistently concerned about. I believe Shanks considers Blackbeard his problem to deal with and not Luffy's, and now that Blackbeard is making moves to acquire the Road Poneglyph, Shanks needs to move to cut him off. I also believe that Shanks intends to push Luffy to surpass him by competing with him as an equal. If Shanks believes he wasn't enough to achieve Roger's will, the man who does must be even greater still. There has been a lot of speculation over the years about Shanks' ultimate role in the series, and as we move deeper into the final saga, I'm going to be fascinated to see what becomes of Red-Haired Shanks. However, that's a long discussion. However, I did say at the beginning of this video, and in the title, that this was going to be a theory about the end of One Piece. And I'm honestly finally pretty ready to make good on that promise. The Roger Pirates achieved it all, but did so too early. The surviving members hatched a plan to make their captain's son accomplish what they could not. However, just as the plan was about to succeed, a twist of fate put Monkey D. Luffy on the journey reserved for Ace. Accepting whatever fate has in store, Shanks set out to prevent the fragile deadlock from breaking until the boy he believes Roger is waiting for is ready to claim what's waiting for him. What happens when the Straw Hats finally arrive at Laugh Tale and claim the One Piece? And why are the triennial human hunt significant to the endgame? Well, during the Straw Hats' return to Shabandi, we see Rayleigh's recollection of meeting Roger. In this memory, Roger asks Rayleigh to join him, and, I quote, turn the world upside down. Years ago, when I first heard this, I got goosebumps because this wasn't the first or only time we hear this in the story. In fact, the phrase turn the world upside down is used most famously not by a young Roger, but by Whitebeard in his dying words, a speech I've already quoted from twice. In it, he says the following. He says, "It has been passed down since ancient times, and in the future, someday, someone will appear, carrying the history of all those decades on his back and challenge this whole world to a fight. Sengoku, you guys in the world government all fear the immense battle engulfing the world that will eventually come. I don't care myself, but as soon as someone finds that great treasure, the entire world will be turned upside down. And someone will find it. The day will definitely come, sooner or later. The One Piece does exist." As I read this, Whitebeard is basically confirming a sequence of events. The treasure will be found, the world will be turned upside down, and an immense battle engulfing the entire world will begin. Finally, I want to examine for just a moment maybe a surprise character, but Kaido. In this context, because what Kaido wants to do should seem incredibly significant in the context I've just established, because Kaido wants to 1. Obtain the ancient weapons, 2. Find the One Piece, 3. Ignite the greatest war the world has ever seen. Keep in mind, King has told Kaido about some version of Joy Boy and believes Kaido might be Joy Boy. What Kaido wants to accomplish tracks perfectly with Whitebeard's statements about the One Piece and the final war, even if his methodology proves incorrect. Now, I don't know what the One Piece is, though I'm partial to Artur's idea over at Library of O'Hara that the One Piece is sake. Check out that video. That's a good video. However, despite not knowing what the One Piece is, we have been told what it will do. It's going to turn the world upside down. Now, that's only helpful insofar as we can figure out what it means. And what does it mean? I believe it means that the hierarchy of power in the world will be reversed, and it will be done so by means of the One Piece itself and the great battle to follow. Those at the top who abuse their power and subject the lower world to their darkest whims will be cast down, and those at the bottom will rise to take control over their own lives. A global revolution is at hand. I turn to Kaido's goals once more, as there was one goal I left out when discussing him moments ago. Yes, he wanted to obtain the ancient weapons. Yes, he wants to find the One Piece. And yes, he wants to start a global war, but he also says this: we're going to take all those pampered noble-born rulers and drag them off their ivory thrones and down to the battlefield with us. Doesn't that sound like turning the world upside down? Sounds like flipping the script to me. Now, I said earlier I'm partial to Artur's theory of the One Piece being sake. We see multiple instances of characters cementing their bonds as brothers or swearing allegiance through the ceremonial process of Sakazuki. Yes, it shares a name with Akainu's actual name, in which sake cups are exchanged to signify a bond. Throughout Luffy's journey, he has collected a large array of allies of different races and creeds. To overthrow the forces atop the world, an alliance will need to be formed, just like an alliance of 20 kingdoms once formed to defeat the ancient kingdom. An exchange of brother cups signifying a global alliance effectively turns the world upside down. And uniting the world against the government, Luffy turns all the citizens of the world into pirates. And in overthrowing the government, he becomes the freest man on the sea, the king of the pirates. I'll point out that if everyone in the world is effectively a pirate, and Luffy is the king of the pirates, you could also call Luffy the king of the world. Which is kind of interesting because we've heard that somewhere very recently. In fact, it's the first time we've heard the phrase king of the world in the series. And who is it that's professing a desire to be king of the world? Strike that. Davy D. Zebek. As an aside, just a note, just a point of interest, I do find it interesting that when Roger is offering to tell Whitebeard about Laugh-Tale, what are they doing? Drinking sake. And when Shanks tells Beckman it's time to go and get the One Piece, what are they doing? Again, drinking sake. In Shanks' case, they are in the middle of a storm when the bottle is pulled out. That's not an opportune moment. That seems intentional, like a hint, like a nudge, like a wink, wink. I can't wink very well, from Oda. Anyway, what does the final battle look like? We know the entire world will be engulfed in an immense battle, and this makes sense if the entire world rebels against the world government. What if I told you Oda is already showing us on a smaller scale what this battle is going to look like? Now, I said at the beginning of the video that I would credit Tekking for an idea I had never considered, and we have now arrived at the time to do so. In his video, Nami's Homeland and the Celestial Dragons, again, go check it out, great video. Tekking speculates a reason the God Knights were mentioned late in the story is because the year Luffy assembled his crew happens to be a year in which the Celestial Dragons would host a human hunt. While Tekking and I agree the story doesn't need such an explanation, it still works. It's kind of interesting. But this is what inspired me to look a little bit deeper, so thanks, Tekking. And it led me to a simple epiphany. If the previous human hunt occurred 2 years prior to the present day, the next human hunt occurs within 1 year of the present day. We are on the precipice of the next and possibly final human hunt. Whew. Do you know what else is likely to happen within the next year within the world of One Piece? Not the real world. It's going to take like 5 more years before Oda gets there. Within the next year of One Piece, it's likely Luffy is actually going to discover the treasure that turns the world upside down. And that war that Whitebeard mentions, that Kaido wants, is going to happen. Do you see what I'm trying to get at? Maybe I'm not explaining it very well. I'm very excited about this. What I'm trying to suggest is that in drinking from the brother cups and forming a global bond, a global brotherhood, Luffy effectively turns the world into pirates. And Emu looks for a final solution. So the last human hunt will be a global human hunt, the likes of which has never been seen before. During this, pirates will overthrow their authorities, civilians will overthrow their oppressors, and a world full of rabbits will overthrow their hunters. The world will truly be turned upside down. In fact, currently the Straw Hats, as you know, are at Elbaf. And how much speculation has there been that time somehow flows differently around Elbaf? Louis Arnault's warning the fictional author within the story of not lingering in Elbaf too long is hanging over us like a dark cloud at the moment. It's unexplained, it's ominous, we don't know why he said that. It's entirely possible that the Straw Hats leave Elbaf to a world on the verge of the last human hunt, if not already fighting it. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, a global human hunt in which the world's authority is effectively reversed, flipping the world as we know it upside down, seems about the most dramatic way to end the series as is possible. But I'm going to leave you with a half-baked idea. Probably shouldn't, because you want to end on something strong, but I'm gonna. It's my video. In my research, I couldn't help but notice the similarities between the Davy Back fights, Emu's Domi Reversi, however you pronounce it, and the human hunts. Both the pirate game and Emu's power effectively force people to flip sides against their will. People are effectively pawns, which we also see reflected in the human hunts, a game in which rabbits are killed for sport and prizes are awarded. I bring this up because I wonder if at some point in the distant past, the Davy Back fight, the Domi Reversi, the human hunts, I wonder if they all stem from one single source. I wonder if there was once a game in which factions battled for sport, which devolved over time to battles to claim and kill people. It's a theory I'm working on, and I confess it's not complete, but maybe I'll release a video on it in the future. Anyway, that's all for me today. If you enjoyed this, please share it. I'd love to hear what you think, positive or negative. I have more content like this in the works if you're interested. It won't be anywhere near as long, though. Look forward to a video about what happens to the island selected for human hunts in the near future. It's going to be a great blend of a topical deep dive and theory crafting. But with that, I'm going to get out of the way, let you have the rest of your day. I've really enjoyed your time. Until next time, take care.